Hello, everybody, and welcome back. I'm joined with our dear brother Fish in Miami, also known as Daryl. How are you doing, brother?
Uh, Pretty good. That question, which that's another thing we could dive into a little bit, is the way we respond to "How are you?" and the authenticity we bring to that, both asking that question and responding to it. It's been on my mind a lot in the last year or so, which is approximately about as long as it's been since we did one of these. In short, I'm good. I'm grateful to be healthy and alive, and I'm in a good place in a lot of ways in my life. But there are complications, and not everything is great. And the nuance and layers of life are complicated. Yeah, to answer that question fully, it will take more time, which we happen to have here today. Hopefully, there will be a better answer to that.
So true. Oftentimes, I find myself responding with the dualistic, I'm doing great. And part of that greatness is sort of accepting the chaos that's going
Hmm.
inside that I wouldn't always describe as great.
Hmm.
But lately, when people ask me, how am I doing? I notice that my answer has shifted dramatically towards my internal capacity to be with my life in that moment rather than the actual circumstances that are happening around me. And that's going to be something that I talk a bit deeper about in today's discussion. Fish and I haven't got on here and talked in about a year. Wow, a lot of life has happened. We are going to have a catch up here and talk about some deep, vulnerable topics with a level of lightness to it. That's our specialty. That's what we do. Um, how are you doing, brother? Here's a better question. I like this one when people ask me, how is your heart?
That's especially funny for you to ask in this moment. And just to quickly tack on to what you were saying, I really like that perspective of responding to "How are you?" with more of that sort of bigger picture capacity to deal with whatever's happening, because labeling it all as good or bad is kind of like a misguided approach. And Michael Singer, who you talk about a lot, who I've been listening to more like the last week or so, kind of gets into that sort of space of like, well, things are always going to be like here and there, but like, what's our capacity to accept or handle or just be with whatever those things are? So I think that's pretty dope to look at it that way. And then how is my heart? Is funny that you should ask, because I'm wearing a heart monitor right now. Now, to give context, so people don't freak out right away, I've had open heart surgery twice. I go every year for a cardiology checkup. It's very routine stuff. This is a very routine thing for my cardiologist to monitor my heart activity for the course of a month instead of just a quick office visit, and just make sure everything's fine. But I did have a couple of tests done yesterday and things looked good. Everything was normal. So that was good in terms of my literal physical heart. Seems to be doing okay. And part of that probably has to do with being in the gym a lot and really looking after my physical fitness over the last year. And then my heart, on more of an emotional level, is mostly pretty fucking great right now, to be honest. I'm in a relationship with someone I can truly say and embody that I'm in love with, which is a first for me. I have been deepening and focusing on the relationships that really matter to me, and putting less emphasis on relationships that might have value. And I don't want to say they're not important, but I'm at the point in my life, I'm almost 40. The thing I care most about is deepening and fostering the relationships that I have with people that are going to have like really vulnerable, intimate connections with me for probably the rest of my life. That's where I'm trying to dedicate most of my heart energy when it comes to the people in my life. I don't have the bandwidth to do that with every person I know. I think most of us don't. So really like honing in on like who I want to spend my time with, how I want to spend that time. And I've been really having some quality time with people I love lately. So for those reasons, my heart feels pretty full right now.
Hmm. Lovely. Yeah, you mentioned you entered a relationship. I will start my story talking a little bit about the end of my previous relationship in Mexico, which was about 1 year ago. Um, in short, it was the healthiest, most beautiful relationship I've ever experienced. And now that a year has passed, I don't know what happened. I never will. I'm not looking to know what happened. But the story that feels the most true to me is that that wonderful woman was such a clear reflection for me. Also, one who was very intentional and present in their life, and also someone who loved me pretty unconditionally. And interestingly, what happened was I feel like through her clear reflection, I sort of bared witness to my own stuff that I was hiding from. For example, I'll never forget we went on a trip to Baja and we were on the beach and she was just super present and happy being on the beach. And I was like, I want to go look for weed somewhere. And if I were dating someone who also needed a coping mechanism while being on the beach, we would have went and got weed and had a fun adventure and all this stuff. But since she was so grounded, I kind of felt that distance, and it created a story in my head that I'm not perfect.
Hmm.
Basically, those weren't the words I was using, but what I was striving towards was perfection, and I was leaving reality and my true current state of being behind, and sort of shaming myself for not being at this advanced level of presence that I witnessed in my partner. And the interesting thing was that she was loving me no matter what, and I wasn't loving myself, and I sort of died internally in the end of that relationship. One of the most painful things I've ever experienced, and by far one of the most beautiful and impactful. So that happened. I was feeling really low on myself, and I said, I'm going to fly back home to New Jersey, where I am right now, to come closer to myself, to slow down, relax, and start accepting myself more deeply. And about 1 week into returning home to New Jersey, I found out that I was diagnosed with melanoma, which is a life threatening skin cancer. Much longer story about that. Maybe I'll do a separate episode, but there's just a few key components that I feel are valuable to share with the audience that I learned from this experience. First and foremost, if you have any weird freckles or anything, I encourage you to get them checked out by a dermatologist. I had a little mark on my nose. It was not anything serious. And a friend mentioned something. I got it checked out in Mexico. Boom. Turns out it was cancer. Untreated. It's life threatening. So I have no money in this health insurance of America. This was like so much tension on me. In the end, I ended up getting the surgery done for free. I'm still checking my email every day. Like, do I have to run away to Mexico because I can't afford that?
Yeah.
But what they did was they cut off a big part of my nose, and then they cut out. I don't know if you can see it with the light, but yeah, they cut big line down my forehead. And it's really a fascinating procedure because what they do, they messed up my haircut in the process. What they do is they cut here, and then there's like a flab of forehead skin that comes down, and they twist it over my nose, And while it's still connected up here, they stitch it to the hole in my nose. And this
Mm,
forehead skin sort of starts to translate into the cells of the nose and becomes nose skin.
mm,
Now, the tricky part was that for 4 months, 4 months, excuse me, for 4 weeks, I had to keep the skin here. And for lack of better words, I looked like a deformed human being. And this is where a lot of the gifts came from. First and foremost, the one of the most important gifts was that right after I woke up from the surgery, I had blood all over me, like crusty blood in my ear, blood over just like I never had so much blood on me. And then I had this thing on my face, and I'm in the hospital all by myself. And what I noticed was that usually when I have anxiety or discomfort, I'm playing mind games to escape from it. Think about something else or rationalize the feeling, whatever it was. And in this moment, with the face and the blood, it was very clear to me that I was being called for a deeper healing of myself. And part of that request was guiding me to actually hold space for this energy that I'm feeling rather than trying to chase it away. And the analogy that kept coming up for me was an ice cube. And it was like, like hold the ice cube. You can't throw it away, but it will melt if you continue to hold it and have presence and love. And as it melts, the charging energy will start to dissipate. And this has been just an absolute game changer for me since then. And then the other really big thing for me was one, getting more empathy points. Always take those. And then two, about 1 week into my 4 week process, I found myself sort of counting down the days until my face looks normal again. And then I had an opportunity to play this game, which I do in my mind all the time. And that game looked something like this. What if you end up like this for the rest of your life? Because if it's not this thing, maybe you get hit by a bus tomorrow and you lose your right leg, right? Or you lose the hearing in your ear and now you're deaf. Like shit can happen. And if you were like this forever, how long would it take you until you started to love yourself? And it wasn't like some fucking, oh yeah, I get it. Now I love myself. No, literally, when I sat with that, my answer was like, it would take me a couple weeks, like that would be a process. And that's what I started to feel into. And everything else I've learned in my life up to that point, and now with this situation, I'm so grateful.
mm,
It was such a perfect playground to explore unconditional love and my ego and why do I care about a handsome face and giving myself space to care about my handsome face because that's welcome too. But now that we're giving space for all this stuff, I'm able to look more deeply into the source of where I'm looking for acceptance and happiness and peace. And it was all out there. And you can hear all the time about how it's all inside, And you can write it on your Instagram and you can get a tattoo about it. But until you felt it and really gotten in there, those are just concepts that you're trying to chase, which is
mhm,
quite the opposite of actually accepting and being, at least from my perspective. Yet that chasing seems to be a necessary part of this game to find out that it's an endless Chase. You don't find peace. You arrive at it by releasing the charge you have with how you relate to everything.
Mm.
At least that's been my experience. So, to sort of recap my quick little catch up, went through a very deep, loving breakup, which was very difficult, but ultimately the right thing for both of us. Came home, found out I had skin cancer, had my face in a very compromising position for a month, and then they did the exit surgery, and I felt really good about the work they did. I mean, this is pretty recent, and most people have no idea that I had a surgery. So, thank you to the wonderful team at Bellevue Hospital. And there's been some other things that have happened along that way, such as looking for a job in New York, having an interview with SoundCloud for a position that I was literally born to do, and then not even getting the second interview and feeling like a worthless piece of shit, and then recognizing, "Oh, I'm definitely not worthless. Like, this is a story I have in my head, but I was actually a great fit for this job." And just because they're not moving forward with me doesn't mean that I'm a piece of shit. However, my sort of subconscious autopilot voice was coming from that place. And this really allowed me to take a look at that and examine it and see that that's not true. I'm not a piece of shit. Actually, pretty fucking cool. And I'm starting to really feel that. You know, everyone else can tell you, but it doesn't matter for me. It does. Thank you for telling me I'm cool. But ultimately, you know, what's happening inside here is what matters most. I know that you've had a transition in job and relationship. So I want to toss it to you. If anything came up from what I was saying, sure, add to that. But then let's get into your side of the story, and we can start mixing and mashing these two tracks together.
Cool. I would love to talk about myself. Can't wait. But before I do that, I want to bring up something that came up for me in response to you talking about your face and how you had to sort of sit with the possibility of that being how you looked forever, or like, what if that was life now? And it reminded me of when I see like people who have lost a limb or have otherwise suffered some like tragic transformative injury that makes life so much different and in a large way limited in most of those cases. And I think about the same shit. I'm like, wow, imagine like some accident happens, I lose a leg, I can't dance ever again. Like, well, how would I, how would I live with that? I would have to. I think I'd have to find a way. But all that to say, these people are often the most authentic, glowing embodiments of self acceptance that I've ever seen in my life, and it's kind of ironic that it seems to, in some cases at least, take some extreme tragedy or loss in order for someone to be confronted with or forced to fully accept themselves or live in absolute misery for the rest of their existence. Those are kind of your only options in those situations. Whereas those of us who don't necessarily lose an arm or lose our beautiful face, we're not confronted with that in the same way. So I think it's easier to live in this space of non-acceptance of self, and be like on the fringe, like, yeah, I like myself, I'm blah blah blah. But like, do we really, like, when things are at their worst, when we're feeling at our worst, are we really accepting that part of ourselves? And I know for me, the answer is no a lot of the time. And so I think it's kind of beautiful and ironic and fascinating that if we lost an arm or something along those lines, it would we'd be more likely to fully accept ourselves because the only other option is absolute misery. Whereas when you've got all your limbs and your ability to speak and all your senses, you can pretty easily live in this limbo state without it feeling like absolute torture. So that I thought was pretty interesting. That came up for me. And Yeah, you got to think.
It's something I've felt a lot in some of the pseudo spiritual community stuff I've brushed shoulders with over the last 6 months or so. And something that came up for me a few times was like, wow, I wonder if this guy ever had any hardships, because it feels to me like he's only doing the like manifesting side of spirituality, if you want to call it that. And when I look at his life, it's like nice cars, nice house, nice income, pretty women around him, got the DJs staying at his house, all these things. But when I'm with him one on one, I feel some kind of resistance to being authentic. That's how it feels to me. That could totally be my own wounded ego reflecting onto this person. But oftentimes there seems to be this strong correlation that people that have gone through deep suffering and struggle have sort of had to face some dark corners and hallways that ultimately lead to that liberation of acceptance of oneself, where if you've just been escaping yourself with material items and then doing really well at that, why would you ever look inward, right? Like, just start a new business and get a new girlfriend and keep stacking these external things. So it's just one of those things. If the shoe fits, wear it. Like, if that triggers you, maybe there's something to look at in there. But I've been really grateful. I mean, I lost my mom at 22 years old, and if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have grown in a lot of the ways that I have. So it is this like big rock that life throws at you, that how you respond to it ultimately offers an opportunity to really work on yourself. So I feel that very much.
Hmm. Yeah, well said. I think it's so easy for us to follow the sort of prescribed narrative of what the pursuit of happiness looks like, or what like a successful life looks like, and all these things that cultural and social paradigms have imprinted on us as like the right ideas. And if we're just on those paths without like any big rock falling us or anything like that, it's just like such a misguided path for most people. I think, again, like this could be projection, but I'm pretty confident
Right.
that it's, we're misled in what matters in life. And if we don't have these like shitty things happen, let's say shitty things, it's just easy to be lost in that path that doesn't give you the moment to look inward, or feel compelled to like do some digging, to see like what skeletons might exist inside you. And so yeah, suffering is a reward, I guess, is something we've,
Sounds like a gift in this context.
yeah. And yeah, plenty of wiser people than us have pointed at that. So um, yeah, so anyway, I thought that was interesting. And then uh, I don't remember exactly where I was in life last time we spoke, but I'll backtrack a little. And some people who hear this may not have even heard that last podcast. So um, as you know, I've played poker professionally for the larger part of my adult life, from the time I was like 18 till about 30-ish or so. I was playing poker full time. That was my career. That was my identity in a lot of ways. And I reached this sort of benchmark, this like high point, and where it would be easy to think like I should feel happy now. I should feel like successful or fulfilled. All these markers that we chase, or we were told to go towards. And I wasn't feeling any of that. I was feeling kind of shitty and depressed after I did my most successful things in my poker career. And so I decided to take a step back and reevaluate what I was doing in life, why I was doing it, what I wanted, what I really wanted, not what other people told me I might want. And so that gave me a period of like 4 years where I did a lot of self reflection. And fortunately, I was comfortable enough financially that I didn't feel pressed to make money for a little while. So through that time, I was exploring event production and some other things, and trying to like find my calling, as they might say. And for a long time, I just didn't feel like going back to poker. I just felt like there were other things for me to explore in life. And so kind of similar to you, I found a job opportunity that felt like so aligned with what I wanted to do. I interviewed for a manager position at a really cool like hotel, restaurant, music venue space here that a lot of my friends DJ at. It's like a really cool old school spot. It's got a lot of flavor. Just felt like a really great like job for me. I thought I was guaranteed that job, went to Burning Man, came back, and they had given that job to someone else who was in all ways like more fitting for it than I was. But I had to suddenly come to terms with like this job that I thought I had that I felt like super aligned with wasn't in the cards anymore. And so I was now starting to feel a little bit financially pressured and like I needed to start making some money. So I still didn't want to play poker, so I looked around and I wanted to work in a restaurant. I'd always wanted to check out restaurant service and working in hospitality and to see what that would be like. And so I got a job in a restaurant, worked in that place for a little while, kind of reached the ceiling of what was available for me there. Wanted to stay in the space, but needed to expand. So I got a job at a fancy restaurant they were opening close to my place, which like sounded amazing. I was going to work in this like fine dining restaurant, probably make pretty good money doing so, explore deeper layers of hospitality and restaurant culture, which I love those things a lot. I'm a big like food and restaurant guy. So did that for a little while, and then I wasn't really making as much money as I had hoped. The place was not doing all that well. I was working my ass off and making like a fraction of the money that I was making before playing poker, or even money that I would make like doing a lot of other basic jobs, to be honest. And so I was like, this isn't really doing it financially. And it just so happened that as I was having that realization that I might need to pursue something that's more financially rewarding, I I was starting to like look at poker again. I got fired from the restaurant for what it turned out to be like a really stupid reason. The manager like had a huge ego trip, more or less made up a lie about me, and um, it was an interesting experience. And the timing was so sort of synchronistic because I was already like, this job isn't serving me in the way that I needed to, or one of the ways I needed to. I was happy to be of service. I was thrilled to be serving people food and like being part of their dining experiences. Like, I love that shit, but you got to pay rent. So, I was already like, I think maybe I should go back to poker. It's a lot more financially rewarding, theoretically. So I got fired, and I was already like, maybe I should quit this job. So I took that as a sign from the universe, like, okay, it's time to like get back to playing cards. And so, yeah, that happened a year or so ago, maybe a year and a half ago, and I just like jumped back into playing poker again. And that's been a whole interesting thing because before, when I played poker, it was my identity was I'm a professional poker player. Like, I identified as that in pretty much the entirety of my being. And after my break and like doing other things and like seeing sort of a bigger version of life and developing community and like the Burning Man world and the festival world, all this and that, I had like a much broader scope of life when I started playing poker again. So now I'm doing it again, like as a full time financial pursuit, but it's not all of who I am. It's just like something I do. So it's a very compartmentalized part of this bigger being or force of life that I am, because I feel like we all embody so many different layers, that getting trapped into one of those layers is kind of tragic in a lot of ways. So yeah, like started playing poker again. I also started a small business selling mushroom supplements called Fungi Fi, if I might plug that. It's been slow, and I'm not like putting a ton of resources into it. I I'm just letting it grow like as a natural process and like learning along the way. I don't have a bunch of money to dedicate to like ads and marketing, nor do I want to waste a bunch of money on that stuff if I'm not doing it effectively. So yeah, all that was happening kind of in the work zone of my life. And in the meanwhile, I was coming off a phase of partying a lot, like going to a lot of music festivals and events in Miami and things like that. And I was starting to get pretty burnt out by a lot of that stuff and reevaluating like why I was going to a lot of these things and what I was looking for maybe. And I was also trying to date a lot. And I felt like one of the only things really missing in my life, which is, funny that I was looking at it that way, was a relationship. And that in reality, I was probably hoping to fill some sense of scarcity or lack within myself with another person. I think that is quite a common thing for us to do. And I was just having no luck dating in Miami. It's not a great dating pool in general. And just wasn't meeting anyone that felt like really aligned with me. And so I said, fuck it. I'm not going to swipe on these dating apps anymore. I'm like done trying to date. And then a week after I made that decision and like had a heart to heart with some friends about it, I met this girl now who I've been with for like 6 months since then. So it's kind of funny how life works out.
Beautiful. It is funny how life works out. Couple things.
Yeah.
First, you mentioned that you used to identify as a poker player. Now it sort of is a piece of this bigger picture. I'm curious, how has that affected the way you approach the game and work in this sense when you're going to tournaments?
Yeah. That was part of the reason I stepped back from poker when I did, is I felt like I was developing a lot of unhealthy ego ways of being, or unhealthy behaviors, or just ways I was relating to myself and with other people. I felt like I was just being evaluated by people that I met as this like pro poker player, which if you Google me, it says I've made a lot more money than I've ever had in my life. And so at one point I was like stoked by that. I thought I was cool, and that was like something I had wanted. But over time, I was like, man, I really want to form relationships with people based on who I show up as in the moment, and not because of this identity that I'm attached to. So I used to just like so much feel like I'm Daryl Fish, the pro poker player, and that's who I show up as. And I was like in that mode of being. But now when I go, it's funny because a lot of the interactions I have with people, I've known these people for, 15, 20 years, and they don't necessarily know the sort of transformation that I've gone through, or the ways that I've tried to change who I am. And so they still associate or relate to me as they did maybe 15 years ago.
Sure.
And now I don't feel connected to them in that same way, and I don't feel connected to the poker space in the same way as I once did. I can be grateful for it and show up and be like, this is amazing that I have this opportunity to play a game and potentially make a lot of money doing that. I mean, there's a lot of really cool elements about it, but it's something I like show up, do, and then when I leave, it's like I'm clocking out of work. I don't like leave feeling like I'm that person. I show up, put on the hat as the poker player, and do the things I need to do, be the robot I need to be. And then I go home and I'm like, work's over. And that's just like a part of my life that I leave at the door.
I really like the I play poker rather than I am a poker player.
Hmm.
Something you do, it's not who you are. And what you identify with and that mask that we present to the world really has such a deep impact. That's something I've been exploring for a while. A few weeks ago at a party, somebody asked me, "What do I do?" And I was feeling pretty good about myself in that moment. And I was like, "Oh, I'm a teacher." And he's like, "Whoa, cool. Like, what do you teach?" And I was like, "Usually depends on the moment." Yeah, usually depends on the moment, but a little bit of everything. And he was like, "Okay." And like, "What school do you teach at?" I was like, "Yeah, again, like usually depends on the moment, but usually everywhere, you know?" And he's like, "Well, how do you like get paid for that?" And I'm like, still figuring that part out.
Great question. Yeah.
Yeah, good question. But it's true. I remember there was a Phil Good video once years ago. This is a public figure, spiritual character on Instagram, and something I took from that particular message was like he was like, "How do you identify yourself? Because if you identify yourself as a barista at Starbucks, then it stops right there. But if you identify yourself as a light of love to connect and heal with others, then it doesn't matter if you're wearing a Starbucks hat or a Dunkin' Donuts hat, you're a light, like you can go
Mm-hmm.
deeper than just what your profession is. But when you've grown up your whole life chasing professions and perfection and labels and, yeah, I'm a poker player, Google me, like it wasn't long ago since we were there, right? So I see how it happens, but it's really interesting to look at. And then
Yeah.
you mentioned, and finding yourself, I should say, in this beautiful connection with this woman that you're now dating. You sort of prefaced that part of that was probably coming from a place of lack. And it's very interesting because, yes, it probably was, right? And at the same time, it's like we can be so hard on ourselves trying to be this perfect, self actualized, I don't need anything from out there. I got it all in here. It's not realistic for most of us, like ever, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so cool because what's bringing me closer to this like state of enlightenment, if you will, it's really the truth. It's accepting everything that's not that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm no longer putting energy in to overriding my insecurity. So instead of going to the gym because I feel chunky and I don't like that, I'm spending more time laying down and like feeling into why I don't like that and not like looking to fix it, but just looking to be more familiar with that feeling and not meeting it with this judgment and this hate and more this like curiosity and it's like, all right, like that's where we're at right now. Like, can we love this? Like what's
Mm-hmm.
in the way of love right now? And if what is in the way of love is 6-month gym program, you're never gonna get to love. I hate to break it to you, because
Mm-hmm.
then it's gonna be
Mm-hmm.
the next thing or the next thing, or God forbid, you don't work out for a week straight and now your whole life collapses because you were leaning on this. Um, so yeah, it's just hearing you say that I kind of felt a reflection of myself, kind of like being hard on myself for seeking a connection that might be filling a hole inside of myself. Because I think a little bit of all that is true. We all have these holes inside of us, and I think we have an innate, deep desire to connect, and also, you know, put our penis inside of things. That
Right.
like it's natural, it's called being a human being, and even to have the awareness that there's levels of leaning on something external to now fill a hole in some regard, like that's a high level of awareness. But with that awareness oftentimes comes this lens of like, yeah, but it's not perfect. It's like,
Right. And I think that's, you bring up a really good point there. And I should definitely make a disclaimer that, like, I didn't suddenly from one week to the next not have any lack or sense of scarcity, or like felt like suddenly I have it all together. And that's why I found someone that I could really fall in love with in a different way, but more like the acceptance of those things that I might have been looking to escape or avoid by having a relationship to distract myself with, and like really not coming as much from like a seeking space, but from like a self acceptance and like to the best of my ability at any given time, which is going to vary moment to moment, and to like recognize like, yeah, I'm probably lacking some things. I'm definitely not perfect, but like that's okay, totally okay. And neither is the person that I'm looking to fall in love with, and that's okay too. And so I think it's a better way to frame it is more like I was in this space of like not wanting to acknowledge that I was okay not being okay, or that I just maybe never going to be the person that I might idealistically see myself as, and going from a place of like, oh, I can't like possibly be okay with that. So I need someone to like make me feel better about myself so I can escape those possibilities that exist within me, to like okay, I'm actually just going to focus on what's best for me. And part of that is learning to accept myself more fully and more authentically. And part of that is like taking steps towards the improved daily, slightly little bit baby step better version of myself. And that in itself makes you feel a lot better. Like taking little steps is so much more valuable than taking occasional big steps. So I think it was like definitely more of like the space I was coming from when I was looking to potentially meet someone versus like
Mm,
suddenly feeling like, oh, I have everything to offer.
mm,
And and even then, like I'm certainly not doing it perfectly now, but I'm also very much in the space of like being open and honest and trying to consistently evaluate in a really raw way, like what's going on with me, what's going on with us, what's going on with her, and how is that all connected. And part of that is acknowledging, which speaks to your experience a little bit, that like we don't know how we're going to feel in a week or a month or tomorrow even. So like the possibility that we might decide that this isn't really working in the way that it was is like something we really, really both want to be okay with. And
mm.
it's easy to say that you're okay with it. Like we both are like, yeah, we don't know what the future looks like. We are sharing the state of both feeling love and sharing what that looks like together. And we want to spend time cultivating this right now. But who knows what the future is, and that's okay. And that doesn't make this any less special. And that we should still be grateful for every moment, regardless of what might happen at another time that isn't right now. So it's kind of irrelevant.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. You're doing great. I'm happy for you. I truly am. And I want to ask if now that you're in this nice warm hug with this partner, when you look back at maybe, a few months before you guys came together, how much of that seeking for connection do you think was fueling going out to parties per se?
Most probably, because like at the end of the day, like I have friends that I can hang out with, and I have friends I can listen to music with. I have really good headphones if I want to listen to music in a high quality way. So like realistically, going out to a communal space, especially a public communal space where the crowd is pretty undefined, and in my experience, often not on a frequency that I necessarily am aligned with or want to share space with even. So I think at the core of adults going out to like party, or let's call it, or drink, or whatever social activity that we do on a regular basis, I think mating is at a very deep part of that experience, and seeking a mate, seeking sexual pleasure, all these things that involve men and women or whoever, but like let's use men and women as like the the most common example of looking for someone. Um, and that someone doesn't necessarily have to be a sexual connection, but if you're single, chances are there's some motives coming from your groin area. There definitely were for me, and also because like in a music driven space, I'm more likely to meet someone that has something in common with me. At least we have like a similar music taste, or drawn to similar sound frequencies, which is a pretty good green flag based on like very little information. Um, so yeah, I think wanting to meet a girl or girls to connect with sexually was definitely a big factor. In addition to wanting to connect more with people like in the music scene for some reasons that I'm happy with, in terms of networking and what I might be able to offer that scene at another point in time. But also just like wanting to be popular was something from a very young age that I felt. as someone who grew up not feeling really worthy of love or really loved by anyone. I became a people pleaser, and I became someone who would do damn near anything to feel like someone accepted me or loved me. And I've done a lot of work on that part of myself, but it's still in there. And it was even more in there like a couple years ago when I was going out a lot more. And so definitely I can see now, and even still, this is probably present in some capacity. But I was going out in some way to like connect with people that would make me feel like I was worthy of love. And next to that, worthy of having sex with them, which in a big way, for a long time, I associated sex with love and sex with intimacy, which those are not necessarily connected things in every case, which I came to learn over time.
And two-dimensional view to answer this question. So let me unpack all this weird question. Like, how did that work for you? So one dimension is like from that seeking, maybe not being super conscious as you are now, but like looking for that missing puzzle piece to feel good about yourself. Um, were you getting that on the surface level back then from partying that was kind of feeding the ego, giving it what it need? And then two, on a deeper level, like maybe now you see like you're really looking for like authentic, aligned, zero effort connection, that maybe you were or weren't getting from that scene. Like going out with that seekiness, what did it bring you in the end now that we're looking back at that phase?
One is kind of interesting because I was definitely going out with some degree of seeking energy, and seeking validation, that is. But I was also showing up as myself in, I think, a lot of ways.
It's a tricky line, isn't it?
It's a tricky line. Like, just because I was maybe seeking validation from other people doesn't mean necessarily that I was, you know, bending or like molding myself to what they wanted. It might also be the case that I'm showing up authentically, and me showing up authentically just so happens to be a very attractive being of energy that exudes a lot of light on the dance floor and
Right.
therefore is attractive to people in a very authentic way. So I think that I was, and that I think is part of why I built a lot of relationships with people like in the industry, musicians, artists, other professionals who kind of notice those characters in the crowd a little more easily, or like it's just a bigger part of their awareness. Whereas like the crowd, it's just like kind of all mixed together, and not as many people are on that higher level of perception or awareness of like what's going on in that space. Um, so I think it's interesting because I did ultimately form quite a lot of connections, quite a large community, and through that was also very much aware of the fact that I had the opportunity to make an impact on this community and make an impact on these people. So it's not as if there was no potential gift or opportunity involved in these like seeking situations I found myself in, because it's like, okay, sought validation from someone, I got it. That made me feel good in like this shallow surface level way that I thought was like big for me at the time. But now I have this connection, like this person and I recognize each other. The way I show up and the way that I hold space for them, or the way that I offer them my energy, could spark something really valuable or beautiful for them and their life. And the way that they connect or relate with me might in some way like be monumental for them. Not to say that from like an ego perspective, but like we don't know how we affect people, and they don't know how they affect us. I've had interactions on the dance floor that filled me up or like shifted my perspective about something completely. So I think it's a very nuanced sort of subject because yeah, like I might have been going out for this like superficial reason, but as a result of that, something like very deep may have also been happening. Um, so yeah, and then in that, like I was going out alone a lot for a while because I wanted to be able to be with the music and not necessarily need anyone else around for me to enjoy the music that I truly do love. Um, but also like I wanted to be open to connections with people, and like when you go out in a public setting alone, like as you know, there's not this bubble around you. You're kind of more just open to possibilities, and people see you as this like solo character that they can potentially connect to. Whereas if you're with your crew, now there's this sort of bubble around that collection of energy that doesn't keep itself as open to other connections in most cases. Um, so I was going out alone largely for those reasons. And now I find myself, after a lot of trials and tribulations, for sure, to be much more interested in going out with a group of people that I really, really fuck with and like sharing that bubble of energy. And that's not to say there aren't places in the world or communities or whatever spaces that offer like a big crowd of people that I could like be in that bubble with. But by and large, most clubs, most parties, I'm like, I'm just not really. I would love to fuck with more of these people, and I would love to for there to be more openness and all the things that I think are great, but like they're just not there. So I find that like it's draining more often than not to go out alone and try to open myself up to people and just like hit my head against a wall and for lack of a better way of putting it, versus like going out with the homies and like having a real like memorable bonding experience, which is like guaranteed to be worth something.
Bringing up some great points. I think it's interesting that you like going to parties in groups now. That made me smile because for a long time we were very solo, kind of nomadic. And I think there is a bit of seeky. It's like the branches and the roots analogy of the trees, right? Like the branches are these like familiar faces that may one day be a friend, and the roots are your homies. And when you said you like going out with the small crew now, I just like envisioned you with like a tree, like setting up roots in club space. And that made me happy. But I still like going out alone.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a longer conversation there, but I would rather kind of flow into a rant about parties and relationships and my experience chasing girls in New York and stuff like this. Just real quick, now that we've opened
Hmm.
that door.
Sure.
Um, a few months ago, my heart was healing and I was like, okay, like I want to connect intimately with a woman, basically. I don't really want a partnership or a relationship. Um, but I want to touch something for good Lord. I want to touch something that wants to be touched, basically. And it's always been a struggle for me, like I kind of show up as Mr. Lover Pants Jones and I'm looking to really connect with people on like a emotional level, and for whatever reason it often feels out of pocket to like express sexual interest after some of these connections that I've opened up. So it was always been a difficult thing for me. But what I wanted to share was that for about a month I went out like to 3 parties or something, and I definitely was not going out to find a girl, but I definitely had a part of me that was like, I'm open to that and
Hmm.
I want that. Like I'm calling that in. If it doesn't happen, whatever. But like I'm open to connecting like that. And what ended up happening was I was so starved for connection that, and let me say this, I didn't realize all of this until I connected with a woman that was in alignment. So before I met misalignment, it was like, oh, whatever. And then like little moments where I feel like I'm too much or my shoes have holes in them and that's not cool, or I live with my parents and that makes me a loser that you don't want to touch anymore. And that's all fine, you can live how you want, but it was all these always these moments where I felt like a little potential, and then just sort of like, oh, or like I'm too loud, or this or that or the third. And then one night I was out, and I wasn't really seeking, but I was open to it. And without approaching or anything, it totally came to me in a very just natural way, and like the most easy, flowing, funny as fucking hell, the funniest shit ever. Really, a connection happened, and it wasn't even about sexual stuff. There was some stuff in there, but it really wasn't about that. And it was just for me, having felt that alignment and like, wow, this person not only gets me and understands me, they love my vibe, and I can turn it up. The same stuff that I felt like was scaring other people away is being celebrated right now. And in that feeling, I kind of just looked back at my last month or so, and I was like, bro, bro, you have not been honoring your amazingness. And you're really like my perspective. And again, this definitely comes from a wounded ego place as well, but I'm just going to say it. My perspective is like, I'm over here trying to cater to other people who maybe don't have the capacity for certain conversations and vulnerability. And since they don't have the capacity, I'm taking that feedback as like, I need to change who I am
Yeah.
to get accepted by all of these people I see out here. And that was what I was constantly feeling. And like deep, deep down, because Anna in Russia and Annie B in Portugal and many other of you have reached out to me and let me know you're a fucking amazing human and you're changing my life. Thank you. Like it's because of you guys that deep down I feel good about myself. But yet still I was going out and getting this feedback that I'm too much for people that had me feeling really lonely and kind
Hmm.
of down about myself. And then this freaking creature from Germany, of course, we'll get to that later, came in, alignment, had me feeling great about myself. We still talk. She's in Germany living her own life, but like feeling that was such a beautiful thing. And ever since then, I haven't been seeking. I've been feeling good. And ever since then, a new little creature came into my life. We'll keep the details to the privacy. But if you're listening out there, we're talking about you. You know who you are, sweetie pie. I really appreciate you. And I appreciate me, like showing up as myself. And now these really full alignment love engagements are happening. And it's really given me confidence. And in going out to these parties, uh, again, wounded ego comment here. Just preface with that before I go on a little bit of a rant. But when I started going out again in New York, remember I lived in San Miguel de Allende for almost 2 years, and it's like a really small, cute town. And then I came home, had my face surgery, had a broken heart, had a lot of negative internal thoughts I was working through and feelings. That it had been a while since I was around like New York energy. And when I started partying in New York again, it was after like 3 parties that I had this moment where I realized how much power I've given to people in terms of how I feel about myself. And then these same people that I give the power to, I'm hanging out with them at the party and I'm like, I can't fucking stand 96% of you. Like, you're standing and talking on a dance floor and you're triggering me, god damn it. But at the end of the day, it just became really clear that I've been giving my power. I think Will Smith had this video I saw online once about how like we're all looking at broken mirrors. And
Hmm.
like I'm looking at some dude that's looking at me crazy. And now I think I'm crazy because I'm looking at his response to my smile, and he's so broken that he can't handle an expression of love and a smile. So he comes back with this what the fuck face. And then I go home thinking, oh God, I'm all fucked up. Damn, son. I've been feeling
Yeah.
that big time lately, and it feels fucking great. I mean, at first there was anger. You know, sometimes when we gain awareness about where we've been giving our power away, there's sort of a like, oh, hold up. I got some anger now. And then there's like a bit of like, how could I ever look at you? You don't even know how to dance. And I cared about what you thought about me? That's not coming from a place of love. But it was a part of my process, and
Hmm.
it's kind of fun to rant about. So I share that with the audience here. And lately, it's just been more and more and more. I'm going out in New York. I'm getting deeper into myself and sort of presence and not needing external things so much. And then I go out in New York and it's like, holy shit, everyone here is so wired and moving fast. And like the ability to sink in, at least at these parties, from what I'm feeling, uh, is really rare from my experience. And it's become
Hmm.
clear to me that I don't want to live here. Not right now. Maybe in a few years when I'm rich, we'll have an apartment in New York. I love, love, love the city. Way too hectic and busy for me right now. That could change one day, but it's been a great teacher, and I'm still going to continue to dabble. But yeah, just the parties and everything. It just feels so noisy. And at the end of the day, when I really look at it, I'm looking to connect with people. And it happens here and there at the parties, but not so much. And I think a better use of my time is connecting with myself at home and then putting time and love into the Army of Love project to get closer to those people that I'm in alignment with in Russia, Portugal, wherever the fuck they're at, and valuing that more rather than going and chasing it at the shiny parties, which at this point not doing much for me.
Yeah, yeah. I had a pretty similar experience in Miami, which I mean, I haven't lived in New York or spent enough time there to really make a strong statement about this, but I find that when I do go out by myself in Miami versus in New York, and maybe this is because I know a broader community of people like burners in New York, but I can go out in New York by myself and feel a lot closer to the like shared vibe that I'm looking for than like if I go to space by myself, I'm like a scared little boy of like, oh no, like what dark energy is gonna like take me over, which is part of why I was saying I like going out with groups now. That's biased due to where I'm going out most of the time, which is in Miami, which has a lot of yeah. You're gonna say something?
No, I was saying that
Yeah.
that was the Mexican yes.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Sorry, I don't speak the language. Yeah, so I think that's big part of why. Because take for example, Garbage Festival, right? I could have gone to any one of those stages at any day, tripping my fucking face off on mushrooms, and been like, oh, we're all gonna get animalistic together. Fuck yeah, let's do it. Like there was no need for like going with a squad to like feel safe in those spaces, and so
Right.
that is, I think, a big part of the reason why I have recently found myself preferring going with like a crew of close friends. And I think it's important to note, like I don't like going to parties with just like a group of people just to go with a group of people so much as like super homey vibes, where like everybody feels like super safe with each person in that group, and there's just this like social dynamic understanding where like no one's gonna like get super chatty for super long when it's clear that it's not like in anyone's interest. Little things that, you know, like we all have our things. But that's what I love is like going with like four of you and me's that are just like in it for the same reason, like looking to fucking exchange those like stank faces here and there, and just to share that like animal energy. And I just find like so few people in Miami that are down for that type of experience that aren't already part of my little collection of humans. That I just haven't had that many experiences going out solo that have like met the needs that I had at the time. And also, I thought about this as you were talking about your experience going out and like being open to meeting some ladies. And I, like, before I was talking about how I was definitely seeking that to some extent. But even then, like I was, if I'm being honest, like I was still very much going out to enjoy the music and to like lose myself on a dance floor. And I, I know like the broader scope of like young male culture is so much geared towards like going out and like chasing girls, and that's like the goal of the evening, and that's like the primary intention, which for a lot of the people I know and have known throughout the course of my life is a dead end in a lot of cases, and is like a waste of energy or just like a misuse of energy when like going out with not intention number one is like I want to enjoy some good music, I want to dance, and I want to like lose myself a little bit. And then next to that is like also I'd really like to meet a girl that I can touch who wants to be touched. Um, so I'd say that that's kind of where I was at before. It was like because I have never really been like a guy who goes out to like pick up girls. I'm actually pretty shy and when I'm out by myself, and only a handful of times have I even like made a pass at someone when I was out by myself, and it's only worked out maybe one or two times um, over like years of going out. So I think that those are like interesting dynamics that show up in different ways. And yeah, now that I'm with someone, and because similar to what you were saying, like this person is one of some number of people in my life that make me feel like, oh shit, I am great. Like, and that's okay. Like for me to feel that and say that about myself is not narcissistic, because I also know that I have like some shit to work on, but like I have a lot to offer. I'm a really like beaming light in a lot of spaces, and I have great energy, and I like am willing and able to hold space for people. And like I've really lately been trying to step more into space of like genuine confidence and like self love in that capacity of like appreciating the parts of myself that are really beautiful, and that I think everybody would be better off if we could get away from this like ego based version of like feeling confident and like I guess arrogance would be like the ego based version of confidence. But like being truly confident of like the gifts that we have and the ways that we can offer value to people. And so having a partner who like sees those parts of myself like you that I, for example, a big thing that I struggled with for a long time and still occasionally do is like I show up as a 5 year old fucking kid a lot of the time. It's a large part of who I am. I love being playful and silly and goofy. I don't think the world has enough of that energy, so I probably even go farther into that as a way to compensate for like all the serious stiff energy that's around. But I'm also a masculine sexual guy who wants to be intimate sexually with women and really loves that part of myself and wants to attract women sexually. But I've often struggled with like, how do I show up as this like fucking kid that just wants to have a goofy time and also attract a woman who's going to see me as like some sort of sexualized creature. And I, for a long time, felt like, oh, I'm just like too goofy. Like girls can't see me as like sexual or sexy because I'm just so much in my like little kid vibe. But the girl I'm with now is like, no, I think that that's actually very representative of your security and your masculinity, and that your ability to embody that part of yourself speaks to like the bigger spectrum of what you are and who you can be. And to me, speaking as her, I find that very sexually attractive and like very, appealing in that way. So I think I was, and yeah, just for a long time looking for the wrong type of woman to connect with, and like not necessarily seeing like what I really wanted from a woman that I might connect with sexually versus like how I should show up. What should I project myself as for them to want me? I think I was like really fucking up. And now, like, because of her, largely, I'm like, no, I love this part of myself. It's fun. I like being playful with people and silly. That is very much part of who I am. I shouldn't stifle that or like turn that down just because I might run into some people that aren't like vibing with that or aren't on that level, which is, kind of like what you said about being too much. It's kind of the same thing. It's like, no, you're not too much. You're just too much for the wrong people. And I'm not too silly. I'm just too silly for the people that I don't have any real deep resonance with. And that's okay. But I should be looking for what I really want, which is like super deep, like hardcore, vulnerable connections with people. I should show up as who I authentically feel excited to show up as. And that energy will be accepted and attracted to by the people that it needs to be.
And why don't we? Why don't you show up as who you are?
Um, Partially like cultural ideas of what is like masculine or feminine, or what is attractive, or just like ideas in media or like entertainment that give us this like very reductionist or like completely bullshit version of like what people should be like, or maybe even more prominently, fear of not being accepted, which can be, I think, can be mitigated or completely reduced by just accepting this is how I feel good. I feel good showing up this way, and that's really all that should matter.
Yeah, it's I ask because it's the golden question ultimately.
Yeah.
And the moment was perfect. Thank you for sharing the way you do. Um, yeah, like what you said about confidence, and it comes back to what my main focus is right now, and that's my inner lens and my relationship to what I'm experiencing. And even if I'm insecure, I can be fucking confident in the insecurity because
Mm-hmm.
I'm cool with that. Yeah, I'm insecure about my love handles. We've been down this road before, and like I have a new approach to that. Like I accept that I don't like feeling fat. That's okay, you know? Um but I think a big part of that, again, I'm on this deepening, and while I am getting closer to like my own internal confidence, I'm also recognizing that we're humans, and the last Space Hat Sunday was about this, and how if you find yourself seeking validation or feeling like maybe you're not good enough, guess what? That's part of being a human. So it may not be enjoyable. We don't want to stay in that frequency, but these waves are going to come through. And it's okay if a part of you wants to be seen and appreciated by other humans. And in fact, something's probably off if you're not feeling that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think for me, just really allowing the grace for these moments of imperfection. I'm not being Ram Dass or Sadhguru perfectly, um, is ultimately what's leading to my confidence. Whereas a different approach is like, I need to smother the insecurity so that I can be confident. And then, I see these guys.
You can smell it from a mile away.
Yeah, I'm probably projecting. I always like to preface with my absolute truths with that. But there was this guy in LA who was like the cool guy in the crew. You could just see it, all the shit. And when we got on the dance floor, that motherfucker didn't know a damn thing about letting go. And standing next to me, I felt like I was just like melting this guy. I wasn't doing it on purpose, but it was just like I felt all the friction, and like Mr. Cool Guy wouldn't even engage with me. And it's like, yeah, this is all like you got a cool jacket and a cool haircut, and people think cool things about you. And maybe that is cool for you. But what's cool for me is, can you be yourself? And can you show up right now and share that with another? And if you can't, God bless you and nice jacket, bro. But I'm getting the fuck up out of here, you know? And I just see a lot of that. So I don't want to be like an egotistical narcissist that's just judging people all the time, but I can't help seeing what I see and feel what I feel. And I do have empathy for everyone. And it's not like, oh, this poor guy is playing the game wrong. It's just, I feel a level of pain in this jacket. And maybe that's off. But rather than judging him, it's more like, hey, like, can I share my energy without trying to change him or anything? Like, can I just be with this guy without building a whole story about why he's acting a certain way? And that's been difficult for me. So I'm very, very empathetic, and I'm walking on the street in New York, for example, and if I saw somebody who looked really down, or maybe they didn't smile back at me, I would create a story to justify their vibe. And basically in my mind, I would be like, hey, remember that time you got that really intense phone call and you were in a really bad mood and some guy smiled at you in that moment and you weren't in the
Mm,
mood to smile back? Yeah, maybe they're having one of those. And like, this is how I would justify everyone's not openness while I was seeking for connection. So I wasn't really like fully open either. But now it's way just more like the tree is a fucking tree. The way it is, that's just what it is. And this human is being a human in this moment. And I still feel all of my stuff and my mind want to go crazy about building stories. And I kind of just dial it back. And now I'm witnessing the amount of energy and time that was going in to this process that ultimately was just a safety mechanism for me to feel good about myself in that moment. I'm getting all of that time and energy back and just putting it into the moment. And then that's sort of like how I'm interacting with the world. And I'm not really looking, I am, but I'm not really like looking to boost people up as much anymore. It's more like I'm on boost mode. And if we're aligned, rest assured you're going to be boosted, brother. But But if you're not, that's fine, right? And it's sort of like take it or leave it now. And I'm focused on how I feel inside rather than like, yo, how are the people getting it? Oh, maybe I'm too much. Maybe I should stop dancing because nobody here seems to want to dance. Yeah, maybe that's what I
mm,
should do to fit in.
mhm.
Don't you ever stop dancing, boy. Good
Right.
Lord. But yeah, and the last thing I want to say about the confidence is like, ladies and gentlemen, if you're listening to this, if you're listening to this and confidence is something you would like more in your life from an authentic place, it's not the only answer, but a big part of the answer is actually in giving more than what you do. And this is giving your friends the feedback that they are beautiful human beings. You just can't hear it enough. And if you hear it from somebody that you don't value, quite frankly, it doesn't hold the same weight. So when somebody that you care about, a friend, without any particular reason, reaches out to me and says, hey, man, you have been such a wonderful part of my life and I love you. Like, I need like 4 minutes to sit down and feel that, you know what I mean? And then
Mm,
once I felt that, I'm not trying to talk to some girl that doesn't even like my energy or going on Instagram and looking for likes and replies that don't really show up and leave me feeling empty. No, I'm still sipping on that compliment you just gave me because it felt so real. And then that allows me to show up in the world more authentically, which then in turn attracts the alignment pieces that you're really meant to be with. And now we're really doing shit and building and growing and expanding and connecting and sharing that vibe versus I know I'm great, but none of the girls the last 2 months wanted to let me touch them. And like, I'm kind of looking on Instagram and Field and Tinder and Bumble now, and then I spend an hour on the dating apps with zero reply, or like 20 hours over the course of 3 months with zero reply. And that's got me feeling great about myself. So now
Yeah.
I'm going out not feeling confident. And in that state, I'm doing the Seeky Jones, and then Seeky Jones is at the mercy of other people and how they're operating. And if I'm putting my well being at the mercy of these other people, we're in trouble, Doris. Get it together.
Deep, deep trouble.
Tell your friends that they're fucking cool. This is no longer an invitation. This is a goddamn demand. We can change a fucking world simply by saying, Fish, you're cool, man. Honestly, you're fucking great. And I love having you in my life.
Yeah. Simple, like simple gestures, but with like a deep energy behind them that matters a lot to the people that, we're close with. Like you said, I'd rather hear that from one of my like inner circle, real close friends than 100 or maybe even 1,000 people that I like see at parties every once in a while. That like, there's nothing that feels like a cheaper source of validation to me than like if I'm at a party or somewhere where people are taking MDMA and I get I love you, man, from someone who like knows me maybe a little bit, like just on the surface of the water. And it's like I just don't feel much from that. And that's me. Maybe some people do, and for them that's cool. But like I just get so little out of that. Versus like it's Thursday and I get coffee with a friend and they're like, I haven't told you this in a while, but I really fucking appreciate you, brother. Like you fucking add a lot to my life. Like I enjoy spending time with you and I'm so glad that I have you as someone I can call a friend. And it's like, boom. No, that's like a bomb compared to like a BB gun. So yeah, I think encouraging people to acknowledge each other and like say those things to each other because words do have power when they're coming from a source that we give power to, and which is I think an important distinction. Um, so yeah, yeah, and I feel the same way about you for sure.
All the levels, like one, the guy on MDMA that is now telling you for the 17th time that he loves you, it's lost all value, right? Like it's done. But I think also for me, and I learned this from reading The Big Leap, which we should
Mm,
record another episode next week while we're back in the flow because I have so much more to talk about, but not on this episode. But in The Big Leap, they talk about upper limiting, and that's basically like a form of self sabotage. And one of the terms he uses, I believe it was deflecting. And deflecting looks like this. I play a DJ set. You come up and you're like, dude, great set. And my response is, yeah, but I fucked up that transition on the third
mm,
track and I could have prepared more. Like instantly, it's deflecting your love and like focusing on why I don't deserve love, basically. And I think for me, sometimes getting those surface level compliments from people, while it is nice and I welcome it, keep them coming. Um, there's a like sort of like a deflection process that I experience sometimes. Like, dude, you're so centered and like your presence is amazing. And I'm like, dude, you should have seen me this morning smoking
mm.
cigarettes, jerking off to porn twice before getting on the train. Like, I'm a fucking piece of shit mess. Whereas you know more about the dark stuff that maybe I don't show to the stranger that I just met at the party. And for you to know some of my shadows and to still show up and say, hey, I know what's going on with your full story. And I love who you are. I love the human that all of that has produced and how you fit into my life. So thank you. That that kind of has a bigger encompassing hug because you've shared more with these people. Um, so yeah, there's that, and then There was kind of a closing statement. We're getting on an hour and a half. So I had a little bit of a closing statement. Literally forming right now as I speak and multitask. But as we're getting ready to close the ceremony, is there anything in particular you want to touch on, or maybe give a little taster for a project you're working on that we may be talking about in a future episode, or a big trip going on? Anything you want to share as we're starting to shutter down here?
Yeah, I mean, as always, there's a million and one more things we could talk about for a million and one more minutes. But yeah, I guess two things would fit into that box. One, I'm about to go to Vegas for the summer to play in the World Series of Poker, and I'm like super excited about that. And it's the first time since my break from poker that I've done this like whole summer in Vegas adventure, which I used to do. I did for 15 years straight. I would spend like 6 weeks or more in Vegas. The last couple of years, I went out for like brief periods of time, and so I'm super excited about that. I don't know how much that has to offer anyone listening here, but it's something that I'm genuinely excited about, and it's going to be interesting to step into that space with this like different perspective that I have about myself and my relationship to poker now. And I just think it's going to be a good reminder or opportunity to practice, like you said before, like doing the thing, not being the thing. And I think that's something that everybody could benefit from like that perspective of knowing that like a thing you do is not who you are. When you know, when we say what our job title is or whatever project we're working on, like just like one of the many things that as a, because like what we are is this like source of energy that puts on a suit and or whatever suit of the day and can do various things. And so like I think it's empowering to stay in that place of like knowing like we are like a lot and we do things, and so the things that we do are just like one of the many things that we're capable of. And that's what I found through my break from poker, exploring other things, is like I'm capable of all kinds of shit. Some of it I might not be great at, but I can do a lot of different things. So getting stuck in like one lane for me felt like extremely limiting, extremely like putting myself in a cage instead of being like a free roaming on the plane, you know, creature that can like explore all these different realms of life. And I've found a lot of joy and excitement and exploring different things in my life outside of this like one thing that I might do the most of, but there's still other stuff out there. So I would encourage everybody to like at least look around the box that they might find themselves in the most often and see like, oh, maybe I should like fuck around over here a little bit, or like maybe there's something interesting, because there's just like so much opportunity in life to try things. And not everybody's in a position to have a lot of free time or have the resources. I get that, like we're all in different situations, but if the opportunity is there to like look around and try different things out, and maybe find a different, not even necessarily line of work, but just line of passion that could even infuse the other thing you do with a different perspective or different angle that might add like a whole other layer of value to it. I think that could be really useful for a lot of people. And then two, I am working on starting a podcast of my own with the girl that I'm seeing, and having it largely be based around talking about relationships and sex. I am not an expert at either of these things, but I've tried to learn about them. Someone whose dad was married 5 times, and I grew up around pretty unhealthy relationships. I think I went to great lengths to see like, okay, what went wrong there and what might be a better way of doing this, because I know it's possible to do it in a way that is much healthier than maybe I was exposed to. So I think that for myself, relationships and sex are both very interesting topics, and I think culturally right now, there are areas that we could all like look to a little more to find meaning in our lives, other than like all this shit going on in the world or all this shit on social media that we can be distracted by. And like at the end of the day, relationships are like the sauciest sauce of life. And that's not necessarily just intimate sexual relationships, but relationships in general. And so like communication, relating, healthy sexuality, which I've certainly had plenty of unhealthy sexual experiences in my life, and I want to talk about that. And I just want to come into that space from a place of like, we don't know it all. We don't have it perfectly figured out, but we're in a partnership where we're really trying to learn as we go and to communicate about everything and like do the best we can. And I would love to share that experience with people who might be interested in listening and just like add some perspective. And I've been fortunate to be exposed to some resources and some thinkers and teachers in the realm of sexuality that I think, especially for men, might not be as commonly accessible or as like promoted as often, just because of friends like Ashley, who thank God for people like her in my life who have given me books or people to look to learn a little bit more about my own sexuality, first of all, and then how that relates to the people I might be sexually involved with. So yeah, that is something that I'm really excited to work on, and thank you for providing opportunities for me to practice my conversational skills and like what it is to create a packaged conversation that people can relate to, and just be real about it, like not be from any fucking holy place or anything. It's just like we're just people trying to do it right or better, and we want other people to be able to do it better for themselves as well. So
Love that. We don't want none of that holy moly over here. We want that authentic, raw realness. At least I do. So I'm looking forward to your podcast. I'm also sending some good vibes for Vegas to
thank you.
do the thing while you're still being your beautiful self. And yeah, I just want to. This might not make sense. It might not work, but I'm going to try. I wanted to conclude today's episode with a short flow about what I've been recognizing in my patterns and behaviors for the last 20 years and a deeper sense of clarity, which seems to be coming into my life lately. And it's mostly around avoidance. Um, for many years, I was obsessed with escaping and escapism. I mean, how many times have we talked about escaping, the mindful escape, all these things? And where I sit today, it sort of feels like escaping is a part of avoiding. And avoiding is actually like the deeper topic, and escaping is something that I do in order to avoid. And what I'm avoiding, sometimes it does have a name and a face, like I'm avoiding doing my taxes, or I'm avoiding getting the health insurance card renewed, for example. But more mystical than that, there's thoughts, emotions, bodily sensations. There's all types of stuff that is seemingly unpleasant that I've been avoiding for at least 20 years. And chances are you have too. And I'm not talking to fish, I'm talking to the human beings that are listening to this. And then, sort of, what happens is you learn early on to avoid that, right? And sometimes it's as simple as like, quit bitching about your emotions and get back to work. Like there's that whole level about it. But more so, I just think that naturally, uh, to avoid discomfort, we seek pleasure. And then you sort of build these behaviors over time. And then once that discomfort comes up, boom, you're avoiding it by going to the cafe that you go to, opening up Pornhub and jerking off, making your third coffee of the day, having a cigarette, reading a book, calling a friend. There is so much we do to avoid what's going on inside of us. And I've known this for a while, but just lately it's become clear to me that in order to move past what we're avoiding. It needs to be given sort of a voice. It needs to be given space to express. And if you've been avoiding for 20 years, it's not easy to just say, okay, now I want to not avoid it anymore. Good luck. I don't mean to be rude about it, but it's funny to me. So what I realized is that in my avoiding behaviors, for example, I'm going on the phone a lot and there's a discomfort. So to avoid that, I go on my phone. But ultimately, what's happening here is that the discomfort needs to be digested. So think about a big dinner. You ate a huge dinner and then you had extra cookies. You are fuller than full. You don't eat more, right? Like you start to calm down and then your body has to process all of the sugar, right? And in that digestion process, the broccoli and the spinach, maybe it takes 10 minutes, but the sugar and the processed shit, that takes 3 hours, right? Because it's not natural and it takes longer for your body to process and digest. So, my perspective is that I wake up feeling shit inside that I want to avoid. Ultimately, that's being asked to have space to digest and to process through so we can lighten the load a little bit. But instead of doing that, I take my phone out and I throw more data and information on top of what is already charged and, quite frankly, messy inside of me. So, in avoiding the mess, I'm actually prolonging the process of feeling discomfort by taking these cheap little hits of dopamine to feel okay in that moment. But now I have even more to digest internally, that to actually get to the deep stuff that is haunting every moment of my life, it requires what feels like a lot of quiet and calmness. And if you've been avoiding yourself for all this time and then you go to be quiet and calm, it's completely hectic, it's scary, it's not comfortable, and you want to go leave and pick up your phone right away. And that's usually what we do. So, this last Michael Singer podcast, he really points out that pretty much everybody is chasing peace and they're trying to get to the finish line of spiritualism without actually accepting where they are now. And where they are now is disturbance. And he asks you to stop trying to place peace on top of disturbance and rather start in accepting and even worshiping, being excited about that disturbance. And this is something I've been trying on for about 3.5 weeks now. And it's completely changed my life. I'm certainly not there yet, but I see how much I've been trying to meditate or go to yoga or do all this stuff to put peace on top of my disturbance. But in actually allowing and finding curiosity in my disturbance, only now, weeks later, do I feel like I have a greater sense of what it is that I've been avoiding, at least energetically. And now I'm taking 10 minutes here, 20 minutes there, one breath here, 2 seconds there. And throughout my day, when I would normally be avoiding, I'm slowly sinking in and being okay with what's going on inside. And this is just the ultimate game changer. But now that I've sort of turned a page in my awareness, I go out, I talk to friends, I talk to people I'm super close with, and I'm like, oh man, like, not to say I got it all figured out, but we have a fucking epidemic going on right now with the way that people feel about themselves and how they act in response or reaction to that with what we have in social media and internet and all of this world. So I've known this is a big topic for a long time. Now I'm feeling a little bit more settled in it, not fighting it so much, where I feel a little bit more empowered to speak on it and maybe provide some guidance and hold some space for people to connect, learn, and grow in ultimately how they feel about themselves first, and then that will reflect in how they relate, you know, to the girlfriends, boyfriends, clerk, barista, whatever it is. It all starts in here, slowly leaning in to what we've been avoiding, and we can do that together. You got to do it alone, but we can do that together, and I feel more confident about really stepping into that. That was always what my purpose was and what I felt my calling was. But being so lost in the sauce, the imposter syndrome sort of had me feeling like, who the fuck am I to talk about being centered when I'm such a mess? But now I'm finding centeredness in the mess,
Hmm.
ready to share it with whoever's feeling called to that. So I'm feeling great about that. And that's where my next steps are. We'll keep doing the music stuff, this, that, and the third. But to me, this is a much more important um, world to explore and to create connection and open some doors for other people. And in return, they're going to be opening doors for me. It's always a two-way street. This is about team us, but I'm dedicated to helping you feel better about yourself. And I feel great about stepping into that. So I just wanted to spew that out in a little word vomit, a
Great
relevant
spew.
ramble. That's what we're doing over here. We're rambling, but the shit is relevant. I'm feeling great. You want to do another one of these soon? Let's book that shit now. When are you going to Vegas?
Going to Vegas on Tuesday.
Okay.
Um, I'll definitely have some time out there, but I'll have to look at my calendar and see like what days are kind of off days, and we'll figure out a time.
Yeah, I feel activated from our conversation, and I have more to talk about, and I want to do that in the right container. So we'll start outlining the next one, and we'll touch base with you in Vegas. Go get that money, brother. Let's go. Let's go.
Let's
Sending love to
go.
Miami, sending love to wherever you're at, knocking lights over. You know how it goes. Big love. Thank you, brother.
Peace.
Very nice. Stay on here for a moment. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.